I'm Ashton Addison from EventChain for Investment Pitch Media and the Crypto Coin Show. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Dylan Dewdney, the CEO of Kylin Network. Dylan, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time to be here today.
Complete pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.
Likewise, let's dive straight into Kylin Network. I know your team has a huge initiative ahead. If you could start for the viewers by just giving an overview and the focus of Kylin Network and some of the problems that your team is solving for.
So the highest level overview of the project, it kind of takes the viewpoint of us being sort of a leading edge, working on this novel idea of Ddata. Right, and Ddata for us means decentralized data marketplace, more or less. But there's sort of other things that conceptually that grow around that idea too, and we take the viewpoint of like, hey, DeFi is this really powerful, incredible, interesting thing that has resulted out of a composite of or convergence of all these different technologies, obviously including blockchain, but also this other things happening in the world right now. We thought, we thought that the comparison was really appropriate because we see data being sort of operationalized and monetized in the same way that traditional financial instruments have been operationalized and monetized in DeFi. We see that happening in Ddata, right? And data getting sort of operationalized and monetized in the same way. So we have this slogan like doing for data what DeFi did for crypto. And that's sort of a real like kind of like the essence of the project. We are rightly and wrongly in some ways, or at least not sufficiently compared to Chainlink or like Polkadot or Oracle of Polkadot or Chainlink of Polkadot. We see that sort of like traditional price feeding functionality as just the first use case of Ddata. Or of automations running sort of like smart contracts and information that we need to get, in the price feeding circumstance, you need to get asset prices to run automations in DeFi. But I think that there are just like an incredible number of use cases above and beyond price feeding that's really like what we're looking at in terms of the big overall vision. So we're probably best conceptualized as like a cross between Chainlink in the sense that we get off-chain data on-chain. The graph where we're working on querying, where we get on-chain data off-chain, where you want to query the graph or query the blockchain and get some information. And then also something like Ocean Protocol, where we're setting up the context for a decentralized data marketplace where there's data feeding and consumption. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. And that's a great intro. Yep. And that's actually one of the first times I've actually heard the term Ddata. Even though Chainlink has been talking about oracles and price feeds for quite a while and sort of brought more of a name to it in the space, you don't really hear a lot about decentralized data. And as an oracle, Kylin, I know Kylin has a lot of initiatives. As a Web 3.0 platform, Oracle is one of the functionalities, but it's not the whole bag. But in terms of the Oracle part, is that really the first step for your team is to get information from price and data feeds and put it into the price feeds for decentralized exchanges so that you can price these assets? And I guess that's really where the cutoff is, where how does a decentralized protocol that's running smart contracts able to find the real-time prices of assets when the contracts, have information that needs to be coming from the real world?
Yeah, so I'll just give you like sort of like an inside look at how this kind of like developed and what some of the thinking was initially, and sort of in terms of the strategy. So I've done traditional startup and I've done crypto startup. And one thing that I've always honed in on is this idea of high value niche use case. So you want to be getting into areas that are growing and also somewhat niche. And I think the first time I read that concept, I forget what it was, but it was applied to like Amazon where they were, or no, excuse me, it was applied to PayPal, helping, I think, Amazon and helping Amazon, and I don't want to use up too much time because I know we only have 15 minutes, but but it was helping. He was helping eBay, right? Like eBay couldn't do settlement, so PayPal helped them. So all of a sudden, all these eBay people were like, "You gotta use PayPal, man! Like it's the easiest way to settle this stuff out. Like, oh my god!" So, like strategically, we took this approach where yes, we had this like, like in the same way that like Amazon wasn't just about selling books, we're not just about price feeding in the sense that, yes, you can sell books on the internet, but you can become this, larger, broader thing too. But that's the first thing you need to do in order to build your business. You have to have like a use case, right? So for us, we thought, okay, Oracle services, obviously there's a hot narrative around it. We demystified that a little bit with our community and in terms of educating what that actually means. It's calling APIs to chain with some consensus validation process behind it. But we felt like that was a very important place to be, and to be in Polkadot was even more important because we felt that some of the scalability issues that we see in ETH and hope maybe they'll get solved. Maybe no one quite knows. Like, if they'll get solved or not. We felt that they would be solved within the Polkadot context. So that here's a great place to build an Oracle, just on that, part of that larger strategic vision. And so we thought, how hard would it be to get a lot of people invested in this idea of a Polkadot-based Oracle? Sure. And that has helped us certainly grow, but it's not, it's not like the big picture. But yes, indeed, we've found our partnerships relatively smooth and easy to make and quick. Like we've rapidly developed over, I think we're now at like 51 public and non-public, which puts us, I think, just right under Chainlink and maybe neck and neck with Band in terms of partnerships. And I think part of the reasoning behind that is because we're in this exploding area and everybody wants exposure to it, meaning Polkadot. And then also we take a very like agnostic approach. We encourage our partners to have multiple oracles because we think that that's just only a good idea, to satisfy a number of needs, because we think that as time goes on, that just narrow oracle functionality, price feeding for DeFi, is going to become a little bit commoditized, A, and then B, it makes logical sense to have a number of vendors or service providers for Oracle services you can draw on. So that's kind of the big strategy and inside look there.
Definitely. And I like how you mentioned how Ethereum it has a lot of DeFi applications on there, and there is a great move to Polkadot to hopefully solve all of these transaction costs, make it faster, make it smoother. And Kylin is also working in the Polkadot and Substrate ecosystem, but it looks like you're anticipating, cross-blockchain transfers or other blockchains as well. If the Oracle in the future needs to work with more blockchains that start coming out with decentralized finance applications, like Cardano or Cosmos or whatever, is that something that is in the works for Kylin?
Yeah, and I guess I should be careful to just temper what I just said by saying, we're not by any means maximalists about Polkadot. In fact, the reason why we chose Polkadot was that we felt, we wanted to, like, we had this thesis where, okay, if we started with the thesis of we expect it to be a multi-chain world. There's going to be a lot of complementary chains. It's not going to be like one chain to rule them all. There's going to be a lot of different layer one solutions serving different needs, and different communities involved with them, because I do believe that it's actually like human beings and communities that are symbiotically attached with blockchain technologies. Like, it's almost half and half in terms of power and authorial vision in my head. But we did think that, like, if that's a thesis, there's going to be lots of chains, and we accept that, then we want to be in the place where the connections are being made. And we want to be in number one. Number two, we want to be in the place where we see, developer interest momentum. So we saw a lot of, developer interest moving over to Substrate. just really organically, not trying to like buy the interest of developers or trying to incentivize them in any way. This is far before Polkadot was getting like high valuations. We saw a lot of developers really interested in it. And then just the overall architecture of it is such that it incentivizes connections being made and sort of like layer one solutions being built on that layer zero, bridge chaining from other layer ones that are extraneous to Polkadot, if you will, like Ethereum and BTC. We felt like that was just like a really great context to build.
Definitely. And in terms of the actual using the Oracle for all of these partnerships that you made, do they require the Kylin token to be using that? And just overall question of what are the main functionalities of the Kylin token on the network, and is it creating a sustainable ecosystem overall?
Yeah, so the really cool thing about, like, I feel like we've almost built more of an incentivization product than like a technological product in some ways. Because the way that we built this out of, I call it as like skin in the game model of knowing something is accurate or inaccurate, right? Like we can't say something is necessarily like true. Like we can't say like once you put a Kylin stamp on it, or powered by Kylin, now it's true. But what you can say is that there's a certain amount of value that's behind whatever is being proffered up or fed as, you know, in a feed in the network, right? You can say, well, there's, you know, a bunch of staked KYL behind this, and if whatever the feed is wrong, if it's crappy, then they're going to lose it. So I think that's like a very interesting way in a decentralized, disintermediated way to ensure that something is sort of accurate, or that you can sort of like depend on it, or the info is worth its, you know, salt, or worth its KYL, we'll say. And I think that that's a really cool functionality that you can start thinking about in these types of systems. I don't expect Kylin is going to be the first nor the last. I expect in this, you know, sort of like Ddata, you know, world, that hopefully maybe another like crypto wave. We're hoping. I expect there's going to be a lot of different types of ways to solve this. And by the way, we made up that word, just so you know, if you hadn't heard of it before, we made it up. So that's why. Although I may have cropped up independently in other places. But yeah, so in terms of the token itself, something that we have that's really neat is obviously we have this consensus mechanism which backs up, you know, all of the API feeds that are being fed through. But then we have a business module as well that we hope is going to actually end up being, in the long term, a larger component of the network, where people are paying for access in KYL to whatever Oracle scripting parameter has been set up by the Oracle programmer to call. And I hope I'm not getting to do whatever the information that is getting called to chain that is important to that person that's calling it. So if you want to look up, you know, let's use that like old school stock example, pork belly futures, you know, prices or something, right? Like if you want to look that up and get a sense that, and automate some sort of functionality in whatever you're working on, that's like something that you can do, and it'll take KYL to access behind a paywall. Now that business module is really neat because the way we've set it up, we expect a real sort of like gold rush of scripting parameters to be developed, because in perpetuity, the Oracle programmers get 15% of whatever KYL is paid to access that Oracle script, right? In turn, the data feeders get a percentage, the miners get a percentage, and so on. But I think that's really neat, because as a developer, I'm like, oh, okay, so if I go on Kylin and I like spend a few months to like write an Oracle scripting parameter calling a variety of APIs or whatever, even one or two, you know, and people use that like forever. Well, now I got it made in the shade. We don't we don't want to have to build everything out, although it's important for us in the foundation to kickstart a lot of this stuff and a lot of thinking about it. So we're working with like Berkeley Blockchain Accelerator right now and getting, a lot of their community into the idea of like, why don't you think about building an Oracle scripting parameter? The KYL serves, that was a really long answer, but it serves three functions. Number one is it's to access for access. Number two, we will terminate in 100% DAO, which is 100% community governed DAO within 5 years, I think, or 4 years after mainnet, but 5 years in total probably. And then three, it's used as part of the consensus and staking.
Great. Thanks, Dylan.
Yeah.
And we are running.
I could have answered that way quicker.
No, it's great to go into details, and I think it helps elaborate a little bit more. So I do thank you for that. And we are running short on time, so I just want to talk about the present and then just the future here in terms of what are you working on right now and the next steps that in the near-term future for what Kylin is going to be releasing to the public in, say, the next 6 months.
Yeah, so the next step for us, one of the biggest next steps is to get onto our road toward Parachain. So, and part of that is releasing, getting on Rococo. So that'll be a big step that we'll accomplish, I think, in less than 45 days. And we'll have some sort of test netting available that people can take part in. The PLL community initiative I think we've designed a really simple, yet very rewarding parachain lease offering initiative for our community so that we have a really great chance of winning a parachain. We've already secured guaranteed we have a guarantee of around 200,000 DOT already for a parachain. So we assume most people think it's around 1 million DOT that will be needed to win an auction for parachain. So that's all coming up hopefully by July, August time. No one knows for sure because it depends on the development of Polkadot. And then in the meantime, we're setting up kind of like bridge staking for our community because it kind of sucks just to hold on to everyone is used to being able to get some yield nowadays from their tokens. So it's like, if you can't figure out yield for your token, you better figure it out in some way, shape or form. So we had this sort of time period between our launch and our mainnet that we don't have any yield functionality. So we've engineered that with a third party. We'll be unveiling that next week for our community to sort of bridge that gap. And yeah, we just keep listening to our community. And in fact, they're like the second CEO in some ways. I mean, very, very angry, sometimes second CEO, and sometimes very extremely happy when the price is going high too, but sometimes very angry too. But we try to listen to our community a ton. I think that communities tell us, your community tells you a ton about what you need to be doing. Some you listen to, some you don't, but those are two big things coming up.
And I completely agree, Dylan. The community, and especially as you continue to grow it into a full DAO and sort of release the project to the community, to have your influence, but then let them slowly step in and give good ideas is very beneficial, I think. So in terms of having more community members, growing the community, having viewers follow along for these updates, what's the best way for them to get involved in the community and to follow along?
Yeah, so we have a pretty active Twitter. We have a pretty active Telegram, both an official and unofficial one. We started this new initiative where every Friday we actually do this kind of almost like a clubhouse in our Telegram, and anybody can come on and ask me for 15, 20 minutes, anything that's on their mind. Hopefully I don't get harassed too much, just joking, but it's actually been really great. We tried it out yesterday. It was a big success. So I'm just a big fan of making really direct connections as much as possible with our community. Obviously we're very busy with the project too, but yeah, those are the main channels. And we can probably link them, under here or whatever. But yeah, Telegram, Twitter, and we'll be a Blockdown. So I hope everybody checks that out. And I guess that's really soon. So 6 days away.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I will leave the links to the Kylin Twitter,
Thanks.
Telegram, and the block down. I know you're speaking there. All the best with that. All the best with the project overall moving forward. And like, let's
Thank
follow
you.
up in the near future when you get these updates out.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'd love that. And I really appreciate your time.